Hey, look out. It's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
All right. Mr. Cool is with us. Look at that. Look at that, Dan. If you and I could look like that, our show would go through the roof.
Yes, it would. We would look like worship pastors and we wouldn't be doing the show. But here we are, nonetheless.
Yes. And if you're watching Facebook Live or YouTube Live, Austin Ludwig is worship pastor at Riverstone Church. He's also artist, singer, songwriter, producer, digital marketer, and he's a friend of a few of our friends, Ezra, who works with us, right?
Mhm.
Ezra, the rock star as well.
He is.
And Susan Norris, whom we're praying for you and your team there, Austin, because you guys do know Susan Norris.
We do.
Yeah. She's a little wild,
Yeah, she's a sweetie, but she can stir it up. Anyway, how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
Doing great. It's good to have you on, and I'm excited to hear about the album that you're dropping, and because I've heard you lead worship before at Riverstone. You didn't know I was there, but I was there.
Okay.
And
I felt your presence, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. God's presence, and then yours too. So
I gotcha.
Yeah.
It's okay. I feel it. It's not the Holy Spirit. It's
something
Dan,
different. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Austin now. Come to find out, I guess you met Ezra. 5 years ago?
Yeah.
You guys worshiped together somewhere or on a project or something. So what got you to where you are today? Let's talk a little bit about that musically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like many, just growing up in church world, being a part of the culture of music and everything that's happening there. I grew up in a super musical family, but my story as far as like adult life has been a little bit different, I find, from most millennials my age, so to speak. There's a lot of bouncing around, but for myself, actually, like I've been at the same church, Riverstone Church, Kennesaw, Marietta area for maybe coming up on a decade. I've been on staff for about 8 years, worship pastor for 5 years. And so it's just been a constantly evolving role and position. And so, yeah, really just cultivating a lot of the craft and the gifts God's given me in that space and that environment. And then really diving in the past 3 to 4 years heavily into producing music, really wanting to have the tools and the craft to be able to do that, starting with my own music and then venturing into, just producing for other artists, collaborating into that world now as well. And so, yeah, it's just kind of been divine appointments, the grace of God, like connecting the dots throughout over time. And, but I feel like deep down, I've always known that this is what I'm called to. So I'm just looking to be, as Jordan Peterson would say, long obedience in the same direction. Sorry, Eugene Peterson, Jordan Peterson, somebody completely different.
Yeah.
You probably heard of
two different people that, know.
False quote. Yeah. Eugene Peterson, long obedience in the same direction. That's kind of the goal that I've desired. And so, yeah, God's breathing on some things and I'm excited about what's going on in this season.
Now, reading over your story of how you became a Christian and the story that led up to that, not an easy story, but interesting nonetheless. Share your story of how you came to know Christ.
Yeah. So to really kind of hit bullet points, I grew up knowing who Jesus was, pretty much my entire life. Believe it or not, my parents were in and out of ministry. I was in and out of the church my entire life, bouncing around a lot. And so, but throughout that time, just a lot of difficulty, brokenness in the home, multiple divorces, and then with just my father struggled with massive substance abuse and just ongoing kind of in the shadows for many years. And over time it escalated and just got really bad, lots of abuse and just I could go on and on with, just unimaginable things that no young person should have to walk through. Right. And so this kind of all reached this precipice. In my teenage years, father gets arrested, put in jail, which is not the first time. I become a foster kid in my teenage years. Whole world completely falls apart. And at this time, I definitely, I wasn't at a place where I was like, God, I'm questioning whether or not you're real, but I definitely was like questioning his intentions. I had a skewed perspective of God the Father, as a lot of people do when they have, issues with family and parents and all that. Right. Yeah. And so, just over time, I just had multiple, just no other way to put it, but just like encounters with the love of Jesus, just in these moments, and seeing his love revealed through people in my life, through the local church. I became a foster kid, but then the local church, man, they pursued me. We were in a youth group at the time before we became foster kids, and they pursued us, loved on us. And then through word of mouth, got us connected with WinShape foster parents, which WinShape was founded by Truett Cathy.
Right.
And it's WinShape Ministries is a broad stroke, but what they do focus with foster care and doing group homes, clinical care, all of the above. So I ended up, they pursued me, and got custody of me. And then the last 3 years of my high school career, I was in a WinShape foster home, and just like, Truett Cathy says this, make sure I don't misquote somebody. He actually does say this. He says it's the title of one of his books. And he says it's better to build boys than it is to mend men. And in my teenage years, I discovered that, because I was discovering, first of all, a correct image of God the Father in this foster home through a peculiar but a beautiful family dynamic with tons of foster kids and whatnot, but just had the love of Jesus shown to me through this foster family, through WinShape, and was in a place where I could be built up, and I could actually just come back and let go and be innocent. And the Lord really restored that innocence. Because, as a teenager, I had to step up, and I was like, man, I got to step up to the plate. I can be a man. I didn't go to high school my freshman year. I took care of my 2 younger siblings, 1 and 2 years old at the time.
Wow.
My sister dropped out of high school. We were taking care of them. Father was non-functioning, drug addict, alcoholic, in and out of jail. And it was just rough. Like power's getting cut off. We're heating up water on the gas stove to give our younger siblings baths in the middle of the day. I should be in high school, I was 13 or 14 years old. And so I just had this hard shell and all this mess that I came into WinShape homes with after being in group homes, being in foster care, going through abuse, and just came into the space where, I was in a place where I was really broken. But what I was able to do is, like cathartically say, this is what's occurred in my life. This is the pain that's happened. And through WinShape, through the love of Jesus, I felt like not only to have purpose for the future, but like God is really in the business of redeeming the past in our stories. He doesn't change what we see, but he changes how we see it, our perceptions, our reality. So he is literally like rewriting our history if we just tilt our heads a little bit. And I just felt like God was redeeming that story. And now when I look back, like I totally see the no devil in the details, but the fingerprint of God in every single part of the story. And he gives purpose to pain. Like that's what separates, I think, believers from the rest of the world, is that we can look at the pain in our life and the suffering and say, there's purpose to that. God can pull something beautiful out of that. And so he's been doing that for the past decade. I'm 28 years old now. And so it's interesting, like kind of, having arrived at this year, and I'm like, man, like, we made it. We made it a decade into the adult world after all that occurred. And still to this day, I'm seeing his fingerprint. The more I look back, I see in hindsight his mercy. So
wow,
I'm still growing and recognizing just God's goodness through all of it. So
what a story. Wow.
Austin Ludwig here with us, artist, songwriter, producer, pastor, digital marketer, speaker. What a great story. We got to have you back to talk more. Let's talk about your debut album.
Yes.
Which is coming out June the 10th. You've already released 5 singles, 5 from that album. Is that what you've released
That's
already?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about the album.
So, the album has just been kind of a culmination of, building these songs that have, kind of come together over the course of 5 or 6 years. If you ask me at this point in my life, or if you asked me when I was like 20 years old, like, hey, when are you going to release your first album? I would have never said, oh yeah, 8 years from now, most people wouldn't. But I'm so glad that this is the season I'm releasing music for the first time, just because I just feel like I'm approaching these songs and songwriting and creating with a holistic perspective. And so the album is called Behold and Become. And really, I feel like that title kind of emulates what these songs are really about and focused in on. I feel like worship is an act of beholding and becoming. Like we gaze upon God and we become like him. It's like that depiction in Isaiah where, he's looking up at God, the year King Uzziah died, Isaiah is looking up at God and he looks at his just beauty, his majesty, and he's like, woe is me, I'm a man of unclean lips. Seraphim comes, touches his mouth with a coal, and he's purified. And then his response is to say, all right, God, send me, I'll go. And so I feel like this is what worship represents. It's like, hey, we behold God. And in that moment, there is this transformative process that happens and we become like him. And so this whole album, I'll say these songs, a lot of people are very anti, me language, self-centric language in worship music. And I definitely understand that. I get that. And sometimes there's like a threshold for that, as I get that. But I do feel like these songs feel a little bit me-centric, but there's no other way to get around it besides the fact that I'm like, I am beholding who you are, and like this transformative new creation process, I'm being changed in that. And so really that's the inspiration behind these songs, the album, what it means to be a new creation in Christ and all that comes with that, kind of inspired by my personal story, watching God redeem brokenness, innocence, all of that. So that's kind of the driving force for the record, and just believing that, worship isn't just something we do for God, but worship it's a person we become for his glory. Because Jesus said, this is what glorifies the Father. And that proves that you're a disciple, is that you bear much fruit. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, man, like if I can become like Christ, bear fruit in my life, then that is what gives him glory. I think that's what worship is. And that's kind of what this record's about, is trying to be like Jesus. So
talking to Austin Ludwig. So are you ready to do a song for us? Did Ezra prepare you for that? Can you do that for us?
Oh, I'm not.
You're not okay,
I didn't set up. I'm so sorry.
We were hoping maybe you could do something, but
I'll come back on though and do it if you guys anytime. I'd love to.
Of course, let's do that.
I know I've got this keyboard here. I'm sitting in a pop-up space right now, so it's kind of misleading. I hope I didn't lead you guys on.
Well, that's just a prop. It's not even a real piano.
Yeah,
right?
It's not. This is actually VR. Like none of this is real.
It's a green screen.
Yeah.
I know exactly where you're coming from, Austin. Austin Ludwig there. We're talking about his project that's coming out in June. What we should do is have you in June right before it's released, and we can set something up.
Yeah,
love that.
For you to do a couple of songs. It's called Behold and Become. Hey, you're listening to Faith Talk Live, and we are talking to Austin Ludwig. And Austin is a artist, songwriter, producer, pastor, digital marketer, speaker, and so much more. All right, so you released 5. So how did you pick the 5 to release? Help me here, because I'm not an artist.
Yeah.
You definitely don't want to. Do you release your best? Do you release what you feel like you should? Are you waiting for the last is the first, or the first is the last? How do you release your project, your songs?
Well, I will say that, as an independent artist, you kind of come into this and you rack your brain strategizing, thinking about, what's the best way to go about this. And if you get into that too much, you get into that analysis paralysis, you overthink things, it takes the joy out of it. So to be honest, I think there was definitely a lot of strategic approach to releasing these songs in what order. Definitely like the first single that you release, you want it to be a statement piece. You want it to feel like it's that debut single that's like, hey, like, this is the first single of an album, of a collection of work. And so you want it, the first single I released was New Creation last year at the end of August. And you want it to feel like it kind of thematically encapsulates what the record's about. And I feel like that is why I went that direction. And then from there, this record it's I mean, I don't, in all humility, I feel like it's different. It's eclectic. I know every artist is like, my music's different. It's special, like, so I don't, but there, the reality is that, going into releasing the singles, I just wanted to, I had a lot of people, they were like, don't release that one. That's not the worship banger, that people will play at churches and do this, and that. And I said, that's not my goal. My goal, like, I would love if people, and, there's people singing songs from the album now, doing it at different churches across the world, which is such an honor to me. But there's also these songs in between that aren't very, what we would call corporate. And surprisingly, those are some of the ones that have done the best organically. Mm-hmm. So many people will come to you, and people from the industry and this and that will say, you got to do it this way and you got to go about it this way. And honestly, like, pray about it and share what you love in the order that you feel like represents what you're creating well. And I feel like that's the approach I've tried to go at it with. And then also it's like, well, if I'm going to have these singles out for a while incrementally, I want to give people different tastes of what we're doing on the record. So I think like picking ones that contrast each other, after the other has been interesting, because it kind of surprises people. They're like, well, I heard that corporate sound and all of a sudden there's this totally different vibe. So yeah, and just kind of flying by the seat of the pants, making decisions along the way, so that's the strategy.
Well, I think marketing wise, it's brilliant, because if you put out, 5 songs that all sound the same, when you're thinking about, I'm gonna buy an album, I'm thinking, well, if they all sound like this, why do I need to buy the album? I've already got one. Yeah. So, wow. Awesome. So what have you heard so far from folks that have listened to the 5 singles?
All great feedback. I think, for a lot of people, I'm not currently some, massive artist, but I do have a community of people who've been tracking with me for a number of years, who've been, kind of hungry for some music to release. And so, I think the general consensus has been, people are, surprised by it, which is a good thing. You never know what to expect, when you've got artist friends, songwriters, and they're like, I'm releasing music, and everyone's kind of like, is this going to be solid or not? It's because it's one thing to be a talented and gifted songwriter in person, but then to independently put together a record by yourself and make it all happen as an artist, it's a mountain. And so, so the support has been phenomenal. On release days, when I really tried to like not hoard what I've created, but really I've tried to like minimally float songs out to friends to let them hear it before it releases. I really wanted like people to hear it all at once, and when it goes live, and so the most meaningful thing to me is the calls, the texts that I get, and people are just like, hey, I'm like in my car listening to your song, I'm crying, like the Holy Spirit's doing something through these sounds and through these words. And that's the ultimate goal, is just to see, like, I want to build a bridge for people to kind of like what my story is, to tilt their head a little bit and say, okay, God, like, I want to see this differently. And there's an invitation for that. And something also interesting that I haven't shared a whole lot, just because it's been a 2-year plus journey, is when we started to build this album, I crowdfunded it, I raised money, but I didn't want to go into it and just be another millennial who was like, hey, what's up? I'm going to write these songs. They're going to change the world, and I need you to give me your money, because how many times have we heard that narrative?
Yeah.
And so what we did is, myself, the executive producer, Spencer, he and I built this record together, good friend of mine. He came to me probably 3 or 4 years ago with this dream of potentially going to unreached people groups and making worship music in their language where they don't have access and resources to do that. And so I said, dude, that's it. I was like, what if we did it? Have you guys heard of Tom's Shoes, where you buy shoes, they give away shoes?
Yeah.
I said, wouldn't it be so cool if, like, when we raised money, we did like a Tom's Shoes model where we would create songs in different languages for people who don't have them, and then we would also create music domestically. So the guinea pig for this was my album. It was like, I don't have any songs out yet. And we're like, let's do this. So we got partnered with missionaries in China, based in Hong Kong. In China, they have firewalls. You can't look up Chris Tomlin or Elevation music. You can't do any of that. And they have such a small amount of worship music that is like on a digital file or anything that they can take with them. They don't wake up in the morning and open their phone and, go on a run in the morning and have this catalog of 100 worship songs they can listen to in their native tongue. And so we partnered with these missionaries. We raised a bunch of money before we built my record and started on that. We flew out to Hong Kong and we built a record in the language of Mandarin in China. And we did some songs that we felt like really shared the gospel clearly and well, like God, You're So Good, Build My Life, and then did some original songwriting with them, translated them to Mandarin. And so it was crazy that we did that still to this day. And we have a heart to continue to do that. And we're just hearing tons of testimonies about people in mainland China who now have access to these songs. And
that's awesome.
And so that was kind of the foundation of what started this whole album. So a little extra backstory. Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
I love that. Austin Ludwig, his new album, debut album, coming out June 10th. That we're going to have him on before the 10th, so that we can hear some of his stuff. And can they pre-order, or where can they get it when it does come out?
Yeah, so it's live for pre-order now. I'm gonna go and I'll put it on the Instagram. My Instagram bio it's a great space for like anything, because I have smart links and things like that they can use. But if people just go to my Instagram page, I'll have the a pre-save link, and pre-saves are awesome. That would be super helpful. And we're shooting for the last Friday of June right now is the goal for the album release.
Okay.
And yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, they can DM me, email, whatever. My information's on Instagram. I'd love to connect with anybody interested in getting the music. So
very cool.
Awesome. They can also see you there, Riverstone, no doubt, every Sunday morning.
That's right.
Worship together. We'd love to talk to you more. Hey, sign up if you will. There's his social media, how you can follow him. We'll be back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.